So, as we begin this new series, which I believe will take us through the next 4 or 5 sessions, I wanted to take a few minutes to speak to why this particular theme felt aligned as a starting place for this year of practice together. And as I was reflecting on what might serve, I found myself tuning in to what my own body, mind, and heart are calling for right now, and what I've heard in our shares here and in other like-hearted circles that I'm part of. And also what I sense strongly in our wider world, which of course includes the natural world. And what I kept noticing is how much is being held, personally, within communities, societally, and even more broadly across the entire global ecosystem at this time in our history. So I found myself sitting with the question, with all that's being held, what teaching or practice could help hold us right now? What might we explore that could sincerely offer support and a source of steadiness to draw on when things feel shaky or tender or overwhelming, as they do, as we've seen even in our shares today? And that question kept leading me back to a teaching from the Buddhist lineage, which I lightly shared with some of you on our day-long retreat a while back. And this is the teaching on refuge. Reflecting further on this, I felt really inspired to take a much deeper dive into this topic. Of course, honoring its Buddhist roots, and also exploring it together in a way that translates some of that ancient wisdom into a language that speaks directly to the times we're living in today. So over the coming weeks, we'll be taking a heartful and practical exploration through the theme of refuge. And each session will focus on a different dimension of refuge, and each one will stand on its own. But together, my hope is that they'll serve as a path to reinforcing our individual and collective practice and offer dependable shelter from whatever storms might blow our way. So today, we'll begin at the beginning with understanding how refuge shows up in our bodies and lives, what it offers and what it does not offer, and how we can begin to recognize the difference between what truly shelters us and what only looks like relief. And before we go anywhere else, I want to take a closer look at the word itself. The word refuge comes from a root that means to return. So understanding refuge is about knowing what we can return to when life feels challenging. And most of us already know what refuge feels like, even if we've never used that word for it. So you might recognize it in moments when something in you settles a little, when the body softens, the breath deepens, or maybe there's room for a longer exhale. Or maybe there's a sense of the burdens you're carrying lightening or shifting a little. Or you might just feel less alone with whatever it is you're holding. These are examples of the felt sense of refuge. And something I want to clarify up front, because it can be a common place of misunderstanding. Refuge is not about escape. It's not about avoiding anything. And it feels important to emphasize this because I know a lot of folks, including myself, who can at times feel guilty for seeking shelter in tough times, especially if there's a sense that maybe others don't have as much access to shelter. But refuge doesn't mean hiding out from difficulty, and it certainly does not take the difficulty away. It means we're choosing to face our challenges with the support that is available to us. And when we can learn to take refuge in ways that are wise and wholesome, to use some Buddhist language, it means we are better resourced to be in service in a sustainable way to what and who we care most about. And this leads us to another question. What are we taking refuge from? Of course, there is not one universal answer to this. In Buddhist teachings, refuge is often described as our response to dukkha, which, if you're not familiar with that word, we can think of it as the stress or uncertainty or unsatisfactoriness that is inherently woven into our human experience. So, to use a nature metaphor, we might say that we're seeking shelter from the inner and outer storms that are a natural part of the weather patterns of life. So these are conditions like, and some of these have come up for us today, overwhelm or exhaustion, the anxiety that can come up from not knowing what's coming next, or maybe the rawness of really caring deeply in times that are tumultuous. We're living in a time like this. So sometimes it's not one big thing, but this steady accumulation of smaller challenges. That means the nervous system never quite gets a chance to settle. And make no mistake, my friends, when we are in the midst of conditions like this, we will seek refuge somewhere. So it's not a question of if we will seek refuge. This is an inherent and wise part of our human nature. So seeking refuge is not a sign of weakness. It's not a lack of courage. As I said before, it's not escape or avoidance. But it's a recognition that our resources are being diminished by the conditions we're facing, and a corresponding wise effort to care for ourselves. But where we seek refuge, what we return to, really matters. Often, instead of seeking wholesome, wise refuge, we reach for what Buddhism calls false refuges. And this is not because we're bad, and it's not because we're doing something wrong either, but it's because they look a whole lot like relief without actually offering the kind of meaningful sanctuary that we're looking for. So, I'm going to share some examples of false refuges from my personal repertoire, okay? And some of you will have witnessed me in these false refuges, so staying constantly busy. If I can just keep producing or achieving, I won't even have time to feel stress, right? Spoiler alert. This actually leads to more stress. It took me years and I'm still learning this. Or how about trying to fix or control outcomes? Like if I can just manage the universe, everything will be fine. Not so much, my friends. I mean, and there's so many of these, numbing or checking out in various ways. This can be doom scrolling, as they call it, or relating unhealthily with food, stress eating, substances, shopping, you name it. So many ways to numb. Or Another big one for me, feeling like it's my job to save or help or rescue, especially the people I love. But honestly, it could be the entire universe at different times. And I will expound on this one in a minute because it's been a huge one for me. And of course, false refuges take countless other forms. And when I reflect on them, I can see so clearly the mindset that they spring from. They're understandable strategies, right? So attempts to reduce discomfort in lives that are inherently uncertain and impermanent. So we're trying to find some ground under our feet. So again, not bad or wrong. But over time, as I just brought a little lightheartedness to, I've come to see all too well that they do not really offer the steadiness or connection or shelter that I'm seeking. And I'm going to share a story with you here about a moment that taught me a whole lot about false refuges. So I'll set the scene a bit. I was on retreat a few years ago, practicing in this beautiful hall that had incredibly high ceilings and dozens of tiny little windows all along the roof line. And because there were a couple hundred of us practicing together in this room, the doors had been opened to let in the air and, kind of keep things cool. So at one point, right after I had finished a practice, I opened my eyes and I noticed that a bird had flown into the hall and gotten trapped inside. And it was up near the ceiling, tapping away at all these tiny windows. Windows that, of course, looked like a way out, but they weren't. And as I watched the bird caught in this loop, a false refuge, seeking a way out through these windows that were not the way, I felt this very familiar impulse arise in me, this urgent need to save. So I was going to rescue that bird. And despite being on retreat, when one might think there would be more awareness, before I even noticed what was happening, my nervous system went into overdrive. The pattern was in play, and I found myself convinced that it was me. I needed to do something. So I went around to the retreat staff writing notes frantically, because this was a silent retreat, hoping that there was going to be some solution. And very kindly and wisely, they advised me that there was not really anything we could do to save this bird, but that it would probably find its way out. I couldn't accept this in the moment. And so I kept trying to think of all of these ways that I was going to come to the rescue, including some pretty crazy ideas like climbing 30 feet into the air somehow and ushering this bird towards the door. Still, by the way, my friends, seeing only that the bird was seeking refuge in the wrong places, right? Now, eventually, it became clear that there was nothing I could do to fix or control this situation. So the only thing that was left was to turn towards my practice. And I stood near the door where I had been doing all kinds of high hand signals and bird calls, trying to usher the bird in this direction. And I let that go. I put my hand on my heart and I let myself feel what was happening. All the distress, all the helplessness, and underneath it, the care. And I breathed and I softened and I practiced. And as I did, something shifted in me and also in the bird. The bird stopped frantically tapping at the windows and it flew down onto this lower beam and it paused and it watched me. I had my hand on my heart. By this point, there were tears kind of pouring down my face. And it was as if in that pause, the bird found enough steadiness to sense the space differently. It was no longer fixated on the window as it got quiet and still. And from that place of settling, the false refuge fell away for both of us. The bird sensed the breeze, and it heard its community chirping away outside, and it flew right past me out the door. It found its own way to freedom. And I saw clearly that my struggle to control and fix had saved no one, and instead had sent me spinning into this state of anxiety and stress and disconnection. And it was the pausing and the turning toward what was happening that was the shift. So from frantic to sensing, from contraction and fear to this openness and compassion. So a powerful Dharma teaching delivered by a teacher with wings. Not every day that happens, but I was very grateful for this one. I share this because these patterns can run so deep. So many of us. False refuges often come from a place of care. They are well-intentioned. From not wanting things to be hard, or from feeling confused or vulnerable. But they can keep us exhausted and braced and disconnected from something deeper that's actually available to us all the time. And this is where the exploration of authentic refuge begins. So not by trying harder or for making ourselves wrong for the false refuges we've mistaken for the way out. We tap at those windows because it looks like a door to freedom. But by learning how and where to return and reconnecting with the wisdom and loving presence that's already here, we truly find that place of steadiness and shelter. So this series is an exploration of that kind of true refuge, which, it's worth noting, is the title of an amazing book by my mentor and teacher, Tara Brach. I highly recommend it if you're into reading. And we'll explore refuge not as an escape from life, but as a way of meeting it more fully. So in the Buddhist tradition, this is described through what are called the three refuges, or the three jewels. And I'll just very briefly touch on them now because we're going to dive much deeper in future sessions into these. But you can think of them as awareness. So this is the part of us that can notice what's happening without being swept away by it. And in Buddhist teachings, this is the refuge of the Buddha. Then we have truth, which is learning to meet reality as it really is, instead of fighting against it. And in Buddhist teachings, this is the refuge of the Dharma. And last, but certainly not least, we have love, that sense of belonging, of community. And Buddhist teachings refer to this as the refuge of Sangha, which of course is a refuge you are already very familiar with. So I will just say these refuges are not ideals to live up to, okay? They're resources that we can learn to access and lean on, and places we can return to again and again, especially when the big old storms of life blow in, and they will. So this exploration of refuge isn't about fixing ourselves or making life behave. It's about entering a shared inquiry and learning together to recognize what truly supports us when things are hard, and how to come back to that support even when the storms are making it hard to see. So over the coming weeks, this is where we're headed. We're going to deepen this exploration together. And for now, today, let's take some time to practice turning towards our experience and sensing what true refuge might feel like in this moment, okay? So let's practice, my friends. And I'll invite you to just do whatever is needed to prepare the body for some stillness. Stretch. Oh, maybe a sip of water. And arranging the body in a way that allows for both some steadiness, as we've been speaking to, but also ease. And when you're ready, you can close the eyes or soften the gaze. And as a way of arriving, at first, simply noticing that the body is breathing all on its own. So nothing to change about it. Just sensing into this life-giving rhythm and all the sensations and movement that come with it. Getting intimate with the breath and what it's like to be in this body, breathing this breath right now. The breath might serve you in some softening of the body. So if you're aware of tension on the inhale, you might open and soften. On the exhale, release and letting go. And as you're breathing, you might also notice the support beneath you, the chair or the floor, cushion. Broadening the awareness to sense the immensity of the earth beneath that. And broadening further still, taking in the vastness of the sky above. And seeing yourself, this small, precious part of the whole, cradled lovingly between earth and sky. And letting go into that support as fully as you can. And as a way of deepening this sense of being held, you might bring to mind a place where you naturally feel safe and at home. This could be somewhere in nature, under a tree, in front of the ocean. Or it could be a familiar place of rest or belonging. Maybe a dear friend's kitchen table, or in the arms of someone you love. And letting yourself sense what it's like to be there. What happens in the body when you feel held? And recognizing that this is refuge, not as a concept, but as a felt sense, embodied refuge. Allowing the body to show you how to know what becoming intimate with refuge is like. Paying attention to the subtle ways it feels in your body, heart, and mind. A softening or a settling, dissolving, a releasing. Really getting to know it. And as you rest here, you might consider a false refuge you're aware of in your own life. Perhaps a familiar pattern you sometimes turn towards when things feel hard. And not taking this in with judgment, but with immense kindness and care. Bringing it close enough in that you can sense it. And how this false refuge lands in the body. Maybe it's a subtle bracing, tightening. Could be that the mind speeds up. Just noticing how it feels. And then acknowledging how it's different from the felt sense of true refuge that you've just been sitting with. Not from a place of analyzing or evaluating or judging, but becoming familiar with the felt sense of these two different states. And letting go of the false refuge. Returning now to the breath. To the feeling of being held. And just making room for whatever arises. And meeting it if you can from this place of refuge. No fixing. No resisting. Just wide open space. In the last moments of our practice, you might plant a seed of awareness, inviting the body to help guide you in recognizing real refuge, and gently signaling when a pattern of false refuge has taken hold. Again, no judgment, but from a place of deep kindness and care, trusting in the wisdom of your body and your loving presence to guide you home. From Tara Brach's book, True Refuge. The great gift of a spiritual path is coming to trust that you can find a way to true refuge. You realize that you can start right where you are, in the midst of your life, and find peace in any circumstance. Even at those moments when the ground shakes terribly beneath you, when there's a loss that will alter your life forever, you can still trust that you will find your way home. This is possible because you've touched the timeless love and awareness that are intrinsic to who you are. Beginning to draw the awareness back fully into this breath, and taking your time coming back, inviting maybe a little movement into the fingers or toes, some deeper, fuller breaths. Mm. Stretch. You might slowly open the eyes. Just reorient to the space you're in. And when you're ready, our shared space. Thank you for your practice, my friends.